Hello everybody, this is Adam from Crypto Assessments coming to you in the second week of September to talk about Ethereum. Ethereum, as many of you know, has been in a downtrend since making an all-time high this past January. We're currently trading at 14% of that all-time high, which has many investors pretty scared and uncertain about the value proposition of this asset going forward. Today I'm going to talk about reasons to be optimistic as well as reasons to be pessimistic about this asset in its current state as well as going forward. It's certainly interesting, it's very complex, and it has a lot of moving parts. And not many people appreciate that about Ethereum. It has massive potential, but also it may be proving itself not to be such a great store of value. But before I get into that, I'd like to cover two bits of current events that I think are very relevant to this asset. First, Ethereum co-founder Vitalik Buterin said recently that he believes that the days of 1000x gains in crypto are over. He went on to say that the future should draw interest to real applications and not simply speculation on what this will do at some time in the future. To the latter point, I could not agree more, and as these projects come to fruition, I look forward to sharing my opinions of them as they materialize into something tangible. At present, it's hard to say whether Mr. Buterin's former point is correct or not. I certainly see assets that I think have massive potential. I don't believe the number of investors in these assets has capped out. I think that more people are learning and becoming more attracted to the asset. I don't see these assets serving the globe as I think they will. So in terms of 1000x gains, if I really wanted to hang on his words, he may be right, he may be wrong, but I would argue that there will be massive growth in this space in the future. And so the second piece of current events involves two major exchanges, both happening to be bit-licensed exchanges. If you follow that, that's New York state law regarding how cryptocurrency businesses can operate. Two exchanges this past week announced their intention to launch stablecoins against the US dollar. Gemini, as well as Itbit, owned by the company Paxos, both revealed plans and demonstrated approval for their assets to be launched at some point in the future. These will be ERC20 compliant tokens that represent $1, similar to how Tether does so on certain other exchanges. These assets will launch in an environment that will comply and already does comply to a very strict and rigorous level of regulation in the form of that bit license. These are New York-based exchanges, so I would expect them to be on the up and up. And if you followed Tether in the past, maybe you would agree with me when you say there are some shady elements. How appropriately backed an asset like Tether is compared to what we will see with the Gemini dollar, which will follow the ticker symbol G-USD, as well as Itbit's stablecoin, which will be called PAX. So I think this is great for Ethereum. I think that that's one of the things that make Ethereum such a good platform, because things like this can happen. Now, I'm going to get into reasons to be optimistic about Ethereum in this bearish market. The first reason why I'm optimistic about Ethereum going forward is the continued existence of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. If you have been following Ethereum for a while, you should understand how connected Ethereum's initial bull runs were to the news released about the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. As far as I'm concerned, they are a who's who of entities in global enterprise that have an interest in incorporating blockchain, and they continue to grow. They show no signs of slowing down. I see that as a sign that Ethereum is still winning the adoption war. Ethereum already has the first mover advantage as a smart contracts platform. This fact, combined with the EEA, give me plenty of hope that the future of Ethereum is still bright, and I have not seen anything related to the EEA that shows that they're looking elsewhere. So the EEA, by way of its existence, is the strongest evidence that any blockchain asset is winning the adoption war. The second reason to be optimistic about Ethereum is that it very much has a killer app right now. Decentralized exchanges have been huge for the space. They've provided diversification opportunities without having to trust a middleman. If you ever use Cryptsy and you lost money there, you know what I'm talking about. And that's just one example of an exchange that went under due to a violation of trust between users and owners. These decentralized exchanges not only remove that trust, but also circumvent certain state laws, like, as I mentioned before, the bit license, that would otherwise prohibit a person from being able to, or prohibit an exchange from being able to do business with customers in their jurisdiction. So decentralized exchanges, the best one these days in my opinion is enclaves.io, but people in the past have used Fork Delta, and before that Ether Delta. IDEX.market is another good one. The existence of decentralized exchanges helps the ecosystem grow. And as I said before with the current events, the addition of ERC20 based USD backed stable coins will only strengthen the service quality of these decentralized exchanges, because they can all add Gemini's GUSD. They can all add it as a trading pair, and now we will see different assets trading against dollars and not necessarily always trading against Ether. This is definitely good, because every time you trade Ether into something else, or it tends to hurt the value of Ether a little bit. So this could be good for the value proposition of Ether. And then third is that we still see continued innovation as far as assets on Ethereum's platform. As time goes on, we're seeing more competitors trying to be smart contracts platforms themselves, but based on my research, I still see assets within Ethereum's ecosystem that are helping it to grow its value proposition. I'll return to this point after I cover one of my reasons not to be so optimistic. Ethereum, Ether, doesn't function purely as a currency, so its ability to be a store of value is actually impaired by its other qualities. For example, if you've been following the ICO craze over the past 2 years, you'll know that a lot of assets have only used Ethereum as a crowdfunding platform. It's obvious when you read their white papers that any asset intending to be its own blockchain has no intention of building value into Ether. Now, I'm not saying don't invest in those. if you see something that excites you and you've done your research, it's your money. You do what you want, right? But if the goal is if we're talking about Ethereum and assets that build value into Ethereum, then we shouldn't be so focused, or we really can't be so focused on the assets that only want to use Ethereum to raise money for their own project. You have to look at it from that perspective if we're talking about Ethereum's value proposition. That said, think also about your time holding these assets that intend to allow you to convert into tokens on their intended native blockchain. If you've been holding, I'm going to say EOS, for a period of time, and then you convert over to their blockchain, you reset your taxation clock. You now have a brand new asset, and the time that you held the previous asset doesn't necessarily qualify in terms of calculating short versus long-term gains. Just something to think about. When we start to discern assets that build value into Ethereum versus assets that take value into Ethereum, we get a better idea of how to diversify within the Ethereum ecosystem, diverse as it is. If you want to support Ethereum and you like the proposition of it, and you see what I see in it in terms of adoption and in terms of innovation, then when you do asset analysis, one of your major questions should be, does this help the value of Ether, or does this hurt the value of Ether, or is this potentially neutral to the value of Ether? I will cover that in a future video, but for now, just be careful out there. There are no sure things in crypto. So until next time, thank you very much for watching. I would appreciate your comments. If you like what I've presented, feel free to subscribe, throw me a like. I look forward to presenting you more in the future. So until then, thank you very much, and be careful out there.